Actually, we're saying this.
So I guess that's the value.
Yeah, we get services. Service. And you take the price to that, you take it. I did. Yeah. Let's do one. Like you were sure. Yeah.
We're gonna go ahead and get started. I believe President Johnson is on his way. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the roll call, and then if he's still not here, we'll go ahead with our agenda and pause if he shows up. When he shows up.
Right, so I know that there are numerous people that can't be here because of conferences and other things, but I'm gonna say all the names just in case somebody found a proxy and I don't know about. So Alan, here, Bellin, here, Virgil, Boyd,
Here.
Brock, Brian, here, Busan, here, Chen, here, Colin,
Here.
Council,
Here.
Dyer, here, Elias, Ellison, here, Hellman, here, Fawcett, Fleming,
Here.
Green, here, Griffin,
Here.
Hadley,
Here.
Hart, here, Hildebrandt, Hopper,
Here.
Ivory, here, Jansen,
Here.
Kazim,
Yeah.
Khan,
Here.
Kimball, Kashkas, here, Maggiano,
Here.
Matthews, Mendes, Moon, here, Ofoe,
Here.
Peralta,
Here.
Riker,
Here.
Roberts, Ruffin, here, Schoon,
Here.
Song,
Here.
Shelman, here, Siciliano,
Here.
Swift, Talbot, Bismarck, Webb, here, Wentz, Yang, here, Yarborough, Yang, here, Zot,
Here.
thank you.
Yeah, just skip ahead to the rest of our agenda, and like I said, if President Johnson arrives, we can go ahead and pause and go back to the discussion with leadership portion. So speaking of, Provost Preston had a conflict, not able to join us today. I did forward you right before the meeting some responses to questions that many of you had asked, so hopefully you had a chance to take a look at that and share it with your colleagues if you'd like to. Few things that people have had questions about relate to the working group on faculty workload, revisiting handbook section 127, et cetera. Received a lot of questions about how those faculty members were selected for that. And so just yesterday, Provost Preston shared the full membership of that committee, and he indicated that Faculty Senate was involved with selecting the faculty. who are on that committee, and that is accurate. Just to be a little bit more specific on that, specifically the Faculty Affairs Committee took point on that and led who our representatives are going to be. If Levi has anything to chime in, he's more than welcome to. Levi, the chair of the Faculty Affairs, was a point on that.
So briefly, since January, I've been emailing the members of the committee that this was an issue that was being discussed in the background and it's likely to come up. And once we have a meeting with Dr. President and he gave the initial charge, I emailed all members to a meeting to select members out of the representatives of different colleges and schools represented on the Faculty Affairs Committee. So members who showed up voluntarily also signed up to be on the working group committee. So nobody was elected, it was a voluntary election to be a member of this committee by representatives of the different colleges and schools on the Faculty Affairs Committee. Please, this is not an exclusive group working in private. Eventually, our meetings are going to be open for everybody who wants to share ideas to attend. So please don't look at this working group as a closed committee. It is an open committee. So everything that is done in college, everything that is done and our programs, eventually come to inform the way that the working group does. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just also clarify some of the process on that. So a major part of their charge is to revise that faculty handbook policy, and that faculty handbook policy, even though there's a special working group on it because it's a really big task, it's not immune from the normal process that all changes to the faculty handbook have to go through. So ultimately, this body, for example, will have an opportunity to weigh in on that product, and it's a big lift. They have a lot of work to do. So I really do encourage you to get in touch with the members of the committee, to engage with the meetings, to share your feedback, because this policy will reshape a lot of how we do what we do. So I strongly encourage you to engage with that group. Anybody have any questions for me or Levi on that?
I understand that it was volunteers from the committee, but it works out or doesn't work out so that there's not, I don't believe there's a representative on the committee that teaches class. And I'm just curious if there would be, this is not me volunteering, but if there was someone interested who felt very strongly that that should be with them, some of you are from the committee who's not part of the dean or from
I believe such.
because I think there's folks that have approached me that would feel much more comfortable about that.
I think it would be good for, not the president. I think it would be good for, to that situation. All that can be done, so.
All right, good. All right, thank you. So I think at this point, I do have a couple more announcements, but I want to go ahead and pause and before he gets too comfortable in his chair.
So cool.
Anthony, go over to our president for any remarks you'd like to make.
Well, thank you. It's getting closer and closer to commencement. So, I know things are getting tighter as you're getting your final assignments and whatnot, but the students seem to still be excited. So if you don't know, Congressman Jack was on campus today. He gave about $637,000 towards infrastructure issues to help about 2,000 feet of storm drain there in Love Valley. So, as you start, hopefully you're not having to write checks come tax day. But for those of you that do, at least you know that your tax dollars are coming back to Carrollton, but certainly to the University of West Georgia and helping support some of that infrastructure. That was our first federal funding that we've received in that capacity. And so he seems to be a great champion for the university and certainly eager to help us pursue other avenues, even beyond just that, introductions, whether that's to other federal agencies or any way that he can help. So speaking of government, as you know, the legislative session ended last Thursday with signed eye, and the legislature is finished, and they came across with their approved budget, and so waiting for the governor to sign off on that. But there were some notable things in there, and some of this we've talked about over the last couple of months as we were going through the session, but I just want to close that out. So one thing, we received the $5 million small cap that was for the TLC, or what is called the Perry Building, to deal with infrastructure and other stuff. All the stuff that nobody really wants to fund. The state came through and gave that $5 million for that. So that's kept in the budget. If you're not tracking, the DREAM scholarship was funded at $325 million. So that's supposed to be a corpus that's put into an account, and then it'll spit off an amount, but that's not just for the University of West Georgia. That's for all institutions in the state. My GR did share some stuff on how it's going to be applied, but it's still kind of very broad. Basically, students have to be working. Working can include federal work studies, can include being a student athlete. It's extremely broad on what working means. You can also be a Hope Scholarship recipient and receive this funding, which kind of seemed to go counterintuitive to what initially it had been, as not merit-based, but more need-based. And so it'll be interesting to see how it's applied and who receives the funding. So the biggest thing is that one of the biggest things I'm sure you care about is the $2,000 that the governor wanted to give to all state employees. That was approved. And so for bi-weekly employees, April 17th, which is that Friday, they will receive their $2,000 minus taxes. And then monthly employees would receive theirs at the end of the month. So that'll be again, that's a one-time merit. Compensation pay does not go into your base. So it is just a lump sum gift from the governor for all the hard work that you've done. The next thing is the budget. So I mentioned to you a couple months ago, around January, that we 25 UWG institutions, we go and present to the board, we go and present to the chancellor, our proposed budget for the upcoming year. And that's based off of assumptions that our enrollment is going to be X, this is how much dollars we're going to get, and state appropriations are paid in arrears, right? So 2 years after the fact is when we get our state appropriations. So from 2014 enrollment numbers is what our appropriations would be up, or 25, I guess. And so we make these assumptions. Hey, it's how much we're going to have once we pay everything. We are going to have, I think it was roughly like $12 million of disposable money that was unencumbered for specific items. But we know that did not include deferred maintenance and fleet vehicles and things that are on our risks list. But could we kick the can? Could we reprioritize? As things change, there's some assumptions in there based off of future, enrollment, tuition dollars. And so we went in there with that assumption. Legislature meets. We talked about maybe a month ago. They came back and said, we believe that online enrollment or instruction is cheaper to give than face-to-face instruction. And so basically what they decided that they were going to do is, I'm just going to dirty this whiteboard, is that, probably better. Is that right now, it's paid 1 to 1.1 for state appropriations for currently, and they were going to take it down to 1. So basically, then 10% reduction for online instruction. That took us which equated to $123 million budget hit for the USG for all online instructions. And we were like number 5 of the things, right? Georgia Tech was at the top. Armstrong was down here at the bottom, and we were here. Georgia Tech was like 23 million of that 123, and we were like 7.5 million of that. As you can imagine, we were none too happy with that because that 7.5 would come from that 12 of disposable, unencumbered money, and that's significant, amount of money to suddenly have to cut, and that's programming cut, that's possibly people cuts. And so we talked with our state legislators and explained that. The system said, hey, this is a real impact on Georgia residents, this is a real impact on our students, and basically, if we have to take this, basically one of the courses of actions we need to have to raise tuition. We haven't raised tuition in USG in the last 7 years. And so we may have unintended consequences to do that. And there was no hold harmless of this 7 million, and there was no retroactive. So it would be based immediately off of the money that we thought we were getting, and then going forward. So while, remember, 2 years ago, our enrollment was, I don't even know what it was, 10,000. Well, then the next year it would be 7 million plus the delta of that enrollment. And then it would be plus the next year up to 16,000 we have this year, right? So we get progressively heavier cuts. You'd already accepted the 7 million loss. Anyways, put you at ease. That passed the Senate. They voted that Friday. And state appropriation, or the appropriations committee, was pretty dug in on that's the direction they wanted to go. It went to conference committee. Conference committee battled it out. Nobody knows what happened, behind closed doors. And they came out and they basically said they were just going to do a straight 32 million cut to the USG budget. No online, no whatever. Now we can make some guesses about what our piece of that would be, right? If we use the same 123 to 7, it's like 5%, whatever. So we could say our, 2 million of this is we're gonna be cut from. The USG could just eat it out of their overall budget and just say, we're not gonna pass that on to the universities. We're just going to absorb some of that. They could play around. And let's be clear, when it pertains to the budget, I'm having to learn this just like you, is that just because our numbers are these, that doesn't mean that when we get money from the USG, because all the money from the 25 institutions goes to the USG, then they decide who gets it in the USG, right? So even though our formula says this is what we should get, USG could be like, this is what you're going to get. And so in some cases that's worked in our favor, right? During some of the downturn, we got money that we shouldn't have got based on our formula funding, which they reprioritized it from other institutions. So it's possible that could be the same thing. They might take from some of the more well-to-do institutions. They might absorb it. I don't have that yet. We have a board meeting coming up next week. I'm sure that'll be a point of the conversation about how that's going to go. I will tell you that one of the things that came out of that conversation is that online is still very much on the minds of the legislatures. And so just because this shot across the bow didn't end in the result, it's very much a conversation that institutions are wary of, because about 50-50 of our instruction is face-to-face instruction and online instruction. Now, granted, part of that online instruction is Georgia Best and their, mid-career professionals or other degrees that's the way they're set up. There are other ones where we have a little more flexibility. We need to have a conversation about what does that look like, so that we don't have to deal with a $7.5 million cut. I will tell you that the state came back and asked the system to conduct a study on how state appropriations are currently requested, because basically all SCH, regardless if it's a Georgia resident, a non-Georgia resident, an international student, all gets paid the same. And so they came out with a number, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like $532 million was being paid in state appropriations to just foreign nationals who are students here in the state. And I think the question was, why are Georgia residents paying for non-resident, specifically foreign nationals? So I think that's a question that the USG is going to have to evaluate and see. Now, we only have about 212 international students, so that doesn't really impact us a whole lot, but if you're Georgia Tech, or UGA, where you have a much larger population, then that's gonna be a bigger hit to your pocketbook. So. Going forward, where does that leave us? Right now, we're no worse off than we were at the beginning of January, because I presented my budget based off of the money I have. I don't know what this is gonna do to me. At a worst case, it's $2 million. It's like 1.7 or whatever, based off of some math. We could probably absorb that. We don't know what our enrollment is gonna be for the next year. It's looking good. It looks up. You need to maintain about a 3% enrollment growth to maintain just kind of with the flow of cost of living, just costs that we have. So we'll see what we have to do to eat that. So then that probably leads us to the next question. How does that impact phase 2 of equity adjustments? That's a great question. And you remember when I talked to you, maybe it was a month ago, I said, if you're just one bad enrollment cycle, one bad HVAC system, right, from being able to do those type of things. And so I'm not gonna lie to you and say that this doesn't have a factor, right? Because it's not like I have an extra pot of money to do those things, right? I have to reprioritize other things to make, one of the most important investments, which is you. And so I want to continue to do that, but I also have to make sure that our financials look good, because it's not worth getting rid of any one employee for the sake of having to, make sure that we go into that phase 2. So assuming enrollment maintains, that number may be slightly less, we may be able to do a little bit more, because again, those are, when you give that adjustment, that's the base space. That means that every year I have to be able to meet that number. And then I just want to make sure, because I had these conversations, does everyone here know how we make money at a university? Because when I talk to people, sometimes I don't think they understand how a university makes money, right? So we have local tuition, right? I'm a student, I pay money, that's cash, that's local tuition, right? Then you have state appropriations. That's based off of some formula funding. If you're a graduate student, you get paid a higher formula funding than an undergraduate student. If you're an engineer, you get more dollars than you do if you're a theater major, right? Then you have research, right? The dollars from, IDC, whatever it is, right? You have philanthropy. Donors give you money, and then you have auxiliaries, right? Those are basically they eat what they kill, parking services, dining, what. I have no ability to control state appropriations or tuition. So most universities, right, if one goes down, I can charge more tuition to offset that cost. I can hope that I get more donors to offset that cost. I can, charge more auxiliaries. I can charge you more in auxiliary fees or parking to offset those costs. So there's levers, and I mentioned this because not everybody understands it. Those are those levers that I can control, and some things are beyond my control, right? I require the system to do tuition, and so that's why other things are important for us to get involved in, so that we can diversify, our ability to control some of these things when other things go bad, so that we're not dependent upon one bad enrollment cycle. We have a little bit. Other thing that came out of the legislature is that we can have a 3% reserve, which is about $2 million. Well, that eats that up rather quickly, so that doesn't give me a lot of, like most businesses, to weather the rough times. So I mentioned this because when you talk about enrollment, who has grad students? Okay, if you admit an international grad student and they come here with a GA waiver and whatnot, I haven't made any money on that student. In fact, that cost me money, because not only do they get 20 hours, so I'm paying them, right? But then they're not paying for tuition, right? So if I got 10,000 of those students, I've made no local tuition. I got some state appropriations, but I've had to offset that because I've had to pay them, right? And so when we talk about tuition or enrollment being 16,000, it's about the right kind of enrollment. So it's not really about 3% enrollment growth, it's about 3% revenue growth to help offset that. Does anybody have questions about that? I feel like I'm giving a great period of instruction. This is what it feels like.
Just a quick question about, endowment, what role does the
Yeah,
endowment play?
great question. Just to clarify, an endowment is not a piggy bank. Right? So when the University of Houston's like, we got a $1 billion endowment, or Harvard's got whatever. Yeah, that's not for them just to like, hey, whenever these things go down, we can raid the endowment and that money's just sitting there, right? Because you as a donor have said, I want my money to support this scholarship or this particular area, and that's what that money goes to. Now, there is some unrestricted dollars in there, but if, let's just say hypothetically, if I had $2 million in unrestricted gifts and then I suddenly use it to fill that hole, that's forever. Now that's not unrestricted anymore. That money is now forever designed to fill that hole instead of making the hard decision that may have to be made instead of filling that hole. And so that's where endowments play into that. That's why it's important to have more philanthropic giving, to help offset either from endowed chairs, professorships, fully funded, right? I mean, some of those are just stipends and whatnot, but certainly scholarships and whatnot. So great question. Anything else I can teach? I'm on the roll. Higher ed's my area.
So, you might not have an answer to this yet, or it's developing, but do you sense that as we're preparing for the fall, are there programs that may have to switch modalities in some ways, or is it just kind of prepare for future years, or is that going to be too reactionary? What are your thoughts?
I'm gonna just do a knee-jerk reaction because I think we need to understand. And I think I came to you early on and I told all of you, right, is that we can't put the genie back in the bottle as it pertains to online education. And even if I wanted to, right, if the other 24 institutions of the system don't do the same thing, then my students would just transition over to another institution that's offered. And realize this also impacts the campus. So just, they're not immune to this. eCampus works like this, right? They belong to West Georgia. They have to have a home campus. Doesn't matter if it's Georgia Southern or whatnot. We get all the appropriations for that student, and we get some of the tuition, right? They have to meet their costs. They have to pay for the instructor or whatever. So they would be bound by the same ratio with regards to them. So we would have to figure that piece out. I think the challenge that we need to have honest conversations about is that when we talk about graduation rates, when we talk about the type of students that we have, is first off, and I do appreciate the fact you said it's taking up the GPA requirements for admissions last session, is that we have to talk about the type of students that we get, right? And one, maybe because of the pandemic, because enrollment numbers are so important, we're at 16,079 if memory serves, because that means dollars, is that we were just going after any student that we could. And maybe we shouldn't. Right, we need to be very strategic in that, because you need a student that could get into Georgia but chose not to. Not the student that can barely get into Georgia Highlands and just be like, well, they're a student. Well, yeah, they're not going to be successful, so that's not a great student either. Not that they couldn't be a great student, but in its totality, if we do a good look, they probably won't be. So I think that's one thing. Next thing is when you think about the buckets, right? You have traditional 18-year-old college student, and what's that pipeline to graduation? And then you have the non-traditional path. Could be mid-career professionals, teachers, going to grad school, adult learners, stop outs, whatever the reason for, working adults. Those are two different things, and it's two different ways for them to be successful, because what this student needs and what this student needs are not the same. And I can't deny this student. I don't want to turn away the single parent that's trying to improve their quality of life. But at the same time, this student is not most likely going to graduate in 6 years if they're taking 6 hours a semester and their focus really is on their job than being a student. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not faulting for that, but that's a different pathway. So they should be admitted into that type of a cohort, because then they don't impact my graduation rate, which is based off the first time in college and the expectation that they're going to be a full-time student and they're going to graduate in 6 years. And so when we talk about online education, are we unintentionally creating an environment where students are cross-studying? Criminal justice area, I know the department heads here, right? Right, so that's one of those things. You got an online criminal justice program and you got a face-to-face criminal justice program. And then you got students going, this week I feel like, not this week, but this semester I feel like taking this class. And then next week I feel like taking this class, instead of saying, no, this is your pipeline. Right? I'm not saying that we can't have some of those classes, but then do we need to talk about a cap? So like Auburn would say, no more than 25% of your degree, so 10 classes out of 40 should be online. And that gives opportunities for you to take classes during the summer when predominantly classes are taught online, or now I'm a junior and senior and I want these experiential learning opportunities to take that. But that's a different type of student than this type of student who is, and I talk to students, I'd say 9 out of 10 want more face-to-face. But for those students that are saying, no, I want more working, okay, well then this is your pipeline. If you look at University of Georgia, their BA and bachelor's degree online, it'll specifically say this is 6 hours a semester, no more. This is designed for students that already have some college but no degree. But it's not designed for the traditional 18-year-old. University of Oklahoma would be the same way. A lot of schools that's their pathway. So I think that's a conversation that we have to get into because the legislature certainly doesn't want us to be an online school. And I think this right here is going to come back because they're going to say, well, then why are we paying? And for many of you, and I don't get me wrong, we've made this argument. You go to Chick-fil-A, whether you order through the mobile app, whether you order online, whether you order in person, the cost is the same. Because each and every one of you cost me the exact same amount of money, as a faculty member to teach, regardless of the modality of how you're teaching. And you're also making an assumption that student is taking every single class online, and then they're not also visiting the campus. And the minute they touch campus, then there's infrastructure support, there's other things that this 10% covers the cost of. That fell on deaf ears. During the initial conversation, obviously in the follow-up, they changed it overall. So we'll see how they do it. But I do think that the tides are changing. It's sure the legislature is going to do it with funding. And so I'd rather get ahead of it. Long-winded answer. Yes, sir.
Might there be long-term unintended consequences that folks, faculty members who are largely teaching online will end up teaching more?
Are there unintended consequences of faculty who are currently teaching online have to teach more?
It's more credit hours.
More credit hour classes? Well, this is not supposed to be a conversation about workload. Right, but your workload would already be set, so it shouldn't be changed. I will tell you that we're looking at preliminary. Man, I love this. Right, you've got faculty salaries by rank, right? And then like type of instruction or whatnot, I think was the y-axis. And everything that was above this line was basically, if you're a full professor, you cost me a lot of money. And am I getting that return on investment by having you teach an online class? If the class size was under X and other variables in there. And so how do I get more of these below this line to make it cost efficient? And so it's either I need a cheaper faculty member teaching it, which is the eCamps model, right? Or I need more students in the class to offset the cost. And so I think those are conversations that would ultimately have to come out of that if we're going to do that. I mean, you should already have a threshold that undergraduates shouldn't be allowed to happen unless it's at a certain point, and graduate classes shouldn't exist, whatever. I know there's some specialty things, or there's clinicals or whatnot. Those are different, unique and whatnot, or you're doing thesis or dissertation stuff. But in general, that's it. Because we're also looking at, and I know some of you teach eCampus, it's like, well, if I get all the formula funding and some of the tuition, but I have none of the labor costs, then should I just have them teach all of the lower baccalaureate? Instead of having this teach it? That's the conversation that needs to happen too.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. You have your hand raised or no?
So what about graduate online versus undergraduate? Is that?
Well, so again, I think that's, again, mid-career professionals, Georgia Best, whether it's, political science or whatnot, some of that, you're just, you're gonna have to have a certain number of that. That's just the reality. Georgia Tech is not gonna give up their online master's in engineering program. That's a huge moneymaker. Probably why they have 23 billion, there. So you're gonna have to say that's just our modality. I haven't been here long enough to understand, but for most of us that have been at other college campuses, this place shuts down at 5 o'clock. But these buildings operate well into the evening or have the capacity to. Now, I don't know why students don't come here in the evenings, and they could be all over the United States or whatever. So how do you get more of that here? Maybe that's not practical. And that's fine, you know. So I think those are conversations, but that's not to say like Georgia Best is suddenly gonna be whatever. Now, the other option is what is online? What is the definition of online? I'm not talking about gaming the game for us, but I'm talking about gaming the game for here. Is high flex meet the standard? You know, if the faculty member is physically teaching the campus, but the student is choosing not to come, does that now fall into a different threshold so that I get, because all I care about really is, well, it's not all I care about, but this is big thing. I don't want to lose any dollars that I don't, right? Can I take it to a hybrid? How many classes? Are we the one that codes that, or is that a definition established by the USG? So I think there needs to be clarity on that piece, because then that would be the next thing is how do you game the game and say, okay, well, I'll just teach all my classes. All my Georgia Best classes are taught at a location in Cobb County or what? And does that mean they're face to face? So how do I minimize that issue? But some of that is just cost of doing business. We're just, because we're not going to do online at all. So how do we play that? Other questions?
So some programs have, don't offer online programs, but offer 1,000, 2,000 level core courses online for those, some sections. And are those going to be going away?
Well, I didn't say any of that yet. I mean, I think that's a conversation we need to understand. What I have asked the provost to do, and I'm getting more into his space, so I don't want to make decisions on behalf of academics, is one, how many online classes are we offering? In its totality. How many online, 100% online degrees do we have? Which I think it's like 6. And then how much of that was made as a decision as a result of COVID or because of declining enrollment or whatever to push it to another thing? Did we actually get SAC's approval when we did that, or did we just kind of like make the decision? And then kind of continue that conversation to take it to wherever it goes as we get more information. And then, we would certainly include faculty involvement into the decision, not unilaterally just decide when you come in on August and like whatever. But I'm just telling you, this is a real thing and this is real money. And so if it comes down to, hey, we're teaching more face to face, which I think we should be doing anyways, because that's what our students want. And it also means that I'm losing $2 million or 32 billion or whatever the number ends up being. I mean, that's real money, right? And that's money that I can't pay you. It's money I can't put into other initiatives or projects or whatever it is, And so I think, remember, every decision has an opposite, reaction to that. So I think those are real things that we need to address. So
We just find that our online sections of theater creation built faster than our face-to-face.
I'm sure it does because you offer it. But if we didn't offer it, then they would just take,
They go to each,
then I still make my money.
but then we lose credit hour generation, which is what.
That's a different conversation. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying there's not unintended consequences. I think those are realistic things that we have to address. Especially in your department, which, is struggling to continue its enrollment as you're being mature and growing. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm not remembering this correctly, but I was wondering if you could speak to what's a relatively recent vote or decision at USG to not go with a proposal to have online fees or activity fees for online courses. And could you speak to how that squares with?
Yeah,
Initiatives?
well, that certainly was an issue that the legislature brought up with regards to online fees. I'll be honest with you, I don't have the exact numbers. I think I'm doing pretty good here, but Online fees, so right, you pay, when a face-to-face student takes classes, they pay, right, rec fee, all kinds of fees in that. When 100% online student pays fees, they're paying like, memory services, maybe 50, 80% difference than the face-to-face instruction fee, and it's to offset the cost. Because at the end of the day, right, tuition and fees, right, this is tuition and fees, but tuition and fees help kind of offset. Right, we don't, an in-state student, we lose money on. Right? Everyone understands, right? We lose money on in-state students. We make no money. Right? Out-of-state students and international is where you make your money. They pay 3 times the amount in tuition and fees typically. But fees, you want to, when it's 100% online, what most institutions try to do is they kind of just, they play a numbers game. They go, oh, well, since we're losing this, parking fee or this rec fee, the online fee magically is the exact same. If you added up all the numbers, and it's a little bit different because I don't think they pay 100% of the same exact fees, but they do pay more fees. And the USG did approve those online fees to help pay for the instructional cost of running online programs and the behind the scene pieces of that. Also because you had students that was 100% online. Then you had students who were like, well, I'm taking one online and whatever. And it's like, well, if you take the minute your foot touches the ground, then you pay face-to-face fees because that helps support the infrastructure of the institution. So those fees were set. I mean, it's before my time, but does that answer your question?
Yeah, I maybe I missed it, but I thought there was a vote to not allow those to be for something. So
There had been a change, that predates me, but I know that online students pay an online fee. And there had been a push about people trying to gang the game and being like, oh, I'm online, but I'm face to face. And it was like, no, if you're going to be 100% online, you're going to pay these fees. And the minute you take even one class, right? So I don't know for those of you that can remember that far back to when you were a doctoral student, right? But when you're in dissertation, you still paid all the fees, whether you.
one credit.
Yeah, you're one credit, right? And you're like, this sucks. So it's the same here. But I will tell you, even on the fees, I mean, we're getting off topic, but like our students are required, even Georgia Best, even you're 100% online, they pay for parking. Now, if I was a student, that's one of those things, like, I think that's, I mean, we need parking, but at the same time, I'd be a little pissed off if I'm in Cobb County and I'm having to pay for parking and I'd never come to campus. We can recode it to something, but so I think those are things that we're also looking at. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Close.
Next question. And we're open to conversations like the online, like maybe, like you said, there are other programs that do other things, like even having a student, telling a student, okay, this is your major, you can take 4 of your classes are going to be online. Or you're allowed to take 4 of these online classes.
Right. Well, what I was saying is that it's not our current policy, right? There are some institutions in the USG that offer no online instruction, right? There are some institutions in the USG that say you can take online upper baccalaureate, so no lower baccalaureate can be online. And then the president at Auburn and I were talking, and he says their requirement is that they say that no more than 25% of your degree can be through online instruction. So if you think 40 classes for a typical bachelor's degree, that means that you can take 10 classes to do that. You decide how you want to spend those 10. Right. Yeah, 83% of students in the USG take some form of online instruction. So I think it's unrealistic to say, I'm sorry? Yeah, to take some form of online. Yeah. So I think it's unrealistic to say you're not going to offer it at all. And that particular one is Georgia State College and University. So that's already kind of a niche school anyways. So I don't think it's unrealistic. Typically, like at Houston, your online thing is to reduce pressure to the main campus because you have parking issues, you have, it's a huge city. So think like Atlanta, right? Georgia State, you know, instead of you commuting, you can take one class. It's one, you know, I don't have to drive to campus early or late. And we don't really have those issues, but that's the reason a lot of people push for online is because it just relieves, you know, pressure onto the campus infrastructure. Again, I'm not opposed to any ideals, but we do have to have conversations about what does that mean because it has real financial implications. I don't want to take all the time because I'm gonna get yelled at. Yes, ma'am. Well, I can't speak on behalf of the board because they're the ones that ultimately make that decision. But I mean, I think that's certainly a conversation that the board could consider, realizing that the board is appointed by the governor. So there's very real political implications of making those decisions. And, you know, the state legislature, you know, may come back harder. It's one of those weird things, you know, even in Texas, it's like the state gives up that thing and says, oh, you make the decisions, but then they can drag you out and beat you with it. When you do, so they don't have to make the decisions. But it doesn't change the fact that, you know, this is the last time this was done was pre-COVID, and you know, there's been just huge costs to running a university, manpower costs, instructional costs, and that should be offset, you know, with here. And I will tell you, Georgia is of all the institutions I've been at, right? I mean, it's still very well funded by the state legislature. I mean, you talk to some of your peers in other states, they may not have as a generous of a governing body that does that, but we're still below pre-recession levels. If you think about, you know, just value of the dollar and whatnot, but I mean, it's certainly better than other institutions as well. I mean, it could always be worse would be their mentality. Anything else? Any other topic? Otherwise, I'm gonna get the hook. All right, I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you setting me up with the conversation about the budget stuff. 'Cause I don't have to deal with all of this information, but I do have a little bit of extra information to share that's very much related. Because the president did a great job laying out the controversy surrounding the whole 1.1 online numbers, et cetera. Yesterday we had the USG faculty council meeting with the chancellor, and he talked extensively about this, obviously. But one of the things that he mentioned was thinking about the bright side of something that actually came out of all of this is for a very long time, the USG and institutions have been advocating strongly that our funding for it. So what actually gives us the state appropriation hasn't been updated since the 80s. They actually devised this thing in 1983. And the board's been advocating lots changed, we need to deal with this. And so they were actually able to get the legislature on board with taking a legit look at our funding formula. So I think for us down here at the ground level, it's oftentimes very helpful to understand the why when we're asked to do things. Well, that's why I'm mentioning this now, because the direction of the chancellor that he's passing down through our leadership between now and the fall is going to be, in his language, he wants an analysis that goes down to the bare walls of what it truly costs to run this place. And so I would imagine that sometime between now and the next several months, we're going to start seeing requests that come down that want to get information on exactly what it costs to run this place. And I think in absence of some context, seeing questions like that can just make us have some more questions. So should you see some things like that, hopefully there will be some context provided with them, but at least you'll have what I'm sharing right now, and you should share it with your colleagues that the chancellor and the board is using this as an opportunity to try and revisit something that should have been revisited a long time ago. That makes sense, Joe? Last thing I want to share before we move on with the rest of the agenda is I still need a replacement. We have, with the good news there is we do, as you know, we need 2 nominees by our current bylaws to have an election. And we have 1 qualified, willing nominee to serve. So until we have 2, I'm not gonna share who that person is, just in case something changes. I want to respect that person's privacy and so on and so forth. We're not having an election until we can have an election. But we have somebody, we need one more person, and we can have an election. So please get in touch with me, get in touch with Laura to either self-nominate or to nominate a colleague who would do a great job. Please, that's in all of our interests. Anybody have any questions about any aspect?
Can we put an asterisk by the name of the person who actually wants it?
So I'll be honest, there have been instances in our past where we have had sacrificial candidates, so everybody knew this person should not win the election. So if you would like to be a sacrificial candidate, that is something that we should also know.
Okay.
Let's talk about it. Oh. All right, thank you all. So let's go ahead and proceed with the agenda, starting with the undergraduate programs committee.
At 17 proposals that we approved and 11 information items. I have not received any questions. Are there any questions? Yes.
I just want to provide an update on page 4. The proposal for, the new course proposal for sports management 4001 digital broadcast. There have been some subsequent discussions between administrators in SCFM and in sports management that my understanding is that proposal in its current form has been withdrawn by the sports management people. And
Okay.
So would you like to propose to amend the current set of action items?
You could propose to just remove that from the block and proceed on voting on the block, and then we'll vote on that.
yes, I'd like to make that proposal to remove this portion of the block for the vote.
And then
We need a second.
second.
Second. So all in favor of removing this course, SPMG 4001 from our block vote and then proceeding with the block vote, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, so now we'll proceed with continuing the rest of the proposals.
What, do I need to do something in curriculum? Okay. Any more questions? All right, all in favor of accepting the other proposals? Would you raise your hand, please? All right, anybody opposed? Anyone abstaining? Thank you.
So now that this course is removed, Martin, help me out here, we can send it back to the committee or vote. Okay, so we'll just table that, send it back. In that case, we'll move on to GPC.
So GPC submitted its slate of proposals and I also received no questions so far and taking questions. Okay, so then all in favor of the GPC slate of proposals, will raise your hand. And any opposed? Or any abstaining? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now next up, we have Levi, Faculty Affairs Committee.
So the Faculty Affairs Committee, we reviewed the USG audit report for last year on issues pertaining to personnel action, personnel review procedures, voluntary resignation, and faculty absence. And this is the proposed language to be added to the faculty handbook. Are there any questions?
You told someone to write a letter 60 days. That hasn't been named.
And that's about resignation of retirement, so that is the, at least 60 days in advance.
I mean, have you told someone to?
So I'm trying to that. This is the recommendation and anybody's had a good day.
So my question would be then, what happens if they don't do that?
There's no penalty. I don't know what's the penalty for doing time. There is also part of the absence, so you will show up with or.
Well, if we agree that it's, that it should, it doesn't say that it wants. To me, that just simply says, well, you know, if they don't, so be it.
It's not one.
Did you talk about what happens if somebody gets a severe illness every day before they said what they said?
But there is a portion of our faculty absence and how that should, that if somebody is sick and doesn't show up, for example, of day, it's a necessary process. So in that case, it's not about this, you not showing up to work. So there is a plan about faculty absence.
Sorry. That's your side button.
Take a vote to the faculty absence.
Other parameters of each are said on the these sorts of circumstances and I would imagine that would be able to argue certification.
These were also questions from the audit from last year. So we're also not only answering the audit questions, but also updating policies in the handbook. So, any other questions?
So whenever you're ready to go.
So in the absence of any further questions, we're voting to adopt this, right? So all those in favor of adopting the new language into our handbook, if you could please raise up your hand.
All of them at once, sorry.
Are we going step by step?
I would, yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the very first.
So could you just be clear for everybody what exactly?
So one, I think that will be helpful, I think, is read the exact language that's going to be adopted and then vote on that specific. I don't have it.
If you would like to, come and take over the computer.
That's okay. So on faculty, let's try to change this. This is a new language on faculty absences, right? So basically the new language, let's go back to the old language so we see. This is the old language, it ended up here, and we added new language to it. I'll give members some time to read. Any questions on the new language? So one, it was a subcommittee decision when we referred to legal and also HR to make sure we're in compliance with USG, HR, and legal policy. And then they brought it back to us, and then the committee, the faculty affairs committee will then.
This USG have a written policy from this, but did that committee come up with this pending?
So we also, we consulted with other universities, KSU, Southern, to find out what is going on in other universities. And then we sent it to legal to make sure that we're not reaching any rules. Legal also edited it and brought it back and we adapted it. Then HR also looked at it and brought it back. Then also we sent it to the provost to look at it and also send it back. So we have different systems looking at the policy before bringing it back to us. And when we finalize it, the committee will then.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
And I think somebody asked the question, but I'm not sure I understood the answer. So this does not apply for situations in which somebody is incapacitated, say, for example, in the hospital, in a coma, in a car accident, or any such thing like that.
Correct, that's my understanding.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
that's a different HR matter.
That's.
Yes.
So this is specifically for somebody who's in their full capacities and who, for whatever the reason,
Doesn't they show?
decides they are not coming in either virtually or physically. Those two things.
Not very up to work, yeah.
Right, for people who teach only online, or people who teach face to face or both, who are not present 10 days.
All right. Those who are not showing up to work.
If I can interject.
Sure.
If memory serves, this issue right here is a direct result of, you had some colleagues here who were in New Mexico and England. And the board just said, that's job abandonment. And instead, we were forced to go through the normal process. And so the board said, we're gonna change that policy. To say, if you're not here within 10 days, and you don't already have prior permission, then it's job abandonment. Not an issue of, I'm in a car accident, I'm in a coma, or whatnot, we would know those things, or if your chair or the provost is already aware that you're teaching in that capacity. To avoid this issue of people just unilaterally leaving or some side deal, and university not being stuck with that decision. If that's certainly an issue that came out of that board meeting. Yeah, I think this is what that's addressing.
I think one of the things that's maybe giving me a slight pause and maybe some other people in the room is if the language here directly to the HR policy language or to the situations where there's a health emergency or something like that, that'd be great. I mean, because as it's written, it just says absences, so it creates a kind of a sticky situation where theoretically speaking, somebody could just not respond for 10 days. Of course, our supervisors wouldn't do that. They would respond, but if they didn't, then the person could be removed. It just seems, it sets up a little bit of a weird situation. With vague language is just saying absent rather than in this situation, or language that would refer to the sort of more common HR policies for illnesses.
So we're looking at absence without approval, right? Right, and when we're absent in the city for something, somebody should be able to communicate on your behalf to your supervisor while you are absent. Right, so in that case, that takes care of it. This is just being absent, not communicating, nobody knows why you're absent. That is what this is absent.
Yeah, I think I understand your point, but it does say after those 10 days. And if the institution determines that you have in fact abandoned your position, then you have 10 days. So effectively, if you're not responding to communication in 20 days from your employer. That's how I interpret it.
Business day.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
so you have,
not doing your job.
there is.
Well, and the other thing is that it says that you may be considered to leave, not that you will be considered.
So there is opportunity to still.
So there has.
Yeah.
As someone who personally understands why Paul B was created, I've always, so.
Thank you.
Also, just remind me to refer to parliamentarian, if there is language up or motion to vote on it, you can also always offer an amendment, and add something, remove something that can be voted on here as well.
Further debate, go ahead, call a question.
Are there any further questions? So all in favor of adopting this? People please raise up your hand.
So we're specifically just voting on
Correct.
B and C here together?
C,
Okay.
B and C.
Those
All
opposed,
opposed?
please raise your hands.
Any abstentions? Oh, yeah, always a quick version. Attached. So there's the resignation and retirement letters. Give you a few minutes to read through it, the new language.
Yeah, we had a couple of minutes earlier. We need to talk.
Yeah.
Question, where it says be at least 60 calendar days, does that mean at least 60 calendar days in advance?
Correct. That's my understanding of this.
Doesn't look like there's any questions.
Just
So this chair need further clarification for all. I'm not sure whether there isn't necessarily the word chair for every head of every. I'm just throwing, I don't know. Whether that is the appropriate word or it is in fact the case.
Good afternoon.
Supervisor.
Supervisor. Here.
check.
Whatever whatever the supervisor's title is, so it's accurate in reporting structure. But maybe it should be vague for future changes, right? Maybe supervisor better.
We're changing just
Okay.
this word right here.
The supervisor.
So there's two instances, yeah.
There.
Chair. Okay.
They checked this at the last time, yeah. Should we take both?
Yeah, so the amendment.
I'm just throwing out the question, because I'm wondering, things change. And if this is the language and there isn't the chair,
So do we have so it sounds like the amendment would be to delete chair from those two lines and replace it by supervisor. And we would need a second for that amendment.
Immediate supervisor.
Yeah, a second.
A second, then we would vote on.
I'm just saying, are we doing supervisor or immediate supervisor? Which one are we using?
Yeah.
Which one are we suggesting? Immediate supervisor?
amendment to the amendment. Added supervisor with an asterisk and define it as chair or director, or in the case of the School of Nursing, it would be the need because there is no chair or director.
So are you saying through supervisor?
So long as it is well
It's
defined.
defined.
Okay,
So it means we've got to add another sentence to it, where immediate supervisor may be a chair or a dean. Right?
do we have one more English colleagues?
Not to belabor this, are you sure you want to make it so definite as to be out of date? So, if you put an asterisk and then define it, and then none of the things are in the asterisk that actually are in effect for you, how does that help? So, Dr. Sark, do you have an amendment to the amendment? My question is a direct supervisor understood, or with 5 years down the road, somebody reading this will quibble about it?
I think we're always gonna have some.
Supervisor.
And I think we have, anything else about this?
I think we could just say, we would use the language from the first paragraph and replace. Yeah, we could just say direct supervisor and all three.
Second.
I should say kind of what you said, existing candidates, what, is he thinking of these events? Tied to the debate of information or something should be.
So I think just in terms of like procedure, we've got one question that we're currently addressing related to chair, dean and provost, anything related to 60 days, wait until we decide on this first. Kind of focus discussion. Yeah. Okay, so we're changing, so yes, the vote is on the amendments. I'm just saying this so Laura has the minutes, on deleting chair and replacing it by direct. Correct, all right. Okay, and we got, so that has been seconded, I believe.
Yes. So all in favor of the amendment? You got it. All opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
Then
The second one, the second amendment.
I think there was a question about the 60 days.
60 days. All right. So the second amendment is add 60 days in advance. 60 days in advance.
So it's, yeah, amendment add after 60 calendar days, language in advance.
Second.
Correct.
Okay. All in favor of adding 60 days in advance? Opposed? Any abstentions?
We still have to vote just like this.
All right, now the whole thing.
That's okay.
Has been amended.
All right. So as has been amended.
Yes.
All in favor of adopting the new language? Approval? All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you all. Earn your paycheck today. Sorry, it's very appropriately small, non-existent. Rules Committee.
I'll wait till you're,
I'm trying.
yeah, I know, it's just.
Yeah, well, then I.
Get that feature. Okay. Yeah, so just to recap, last Senate meeting, I stood up here and just shared some ideas that the Rules Committee had regarding the faculty Senate chair and chair elect policy. So regarding procedure, this does not have to go through Senate. But as the committee, as the Rules Committee, we decided to present this as something that Senate will vote on, which will then be a recommendation to the general faculty to vote on any changes we approve, assuming we approve them. And so this is kind of just to make the process more open and having more faculty input. I guess, do you want to add anything? Is that good?
Yeah, so actually, just to clarify, what the Rules Committee is asking you to do is instead of this being a proposal of the Rules Committee to the general faculty, because it's for chair of the faculty senate, that's you to review this policy and make it as a recommendation of the Senate to the general faculty to vote on. But ultimately, for it to pass, it does have to be voted on by the general faculty.
And so I guess just kind of similar to how we did for the past language changes, we can just kind of go through the numbers as they're listed and take a moment if you have anything you want to suggest amendments for, we can talk about that, and procedurally Martin can help us do that. So eligibility, in order to run for chair elect to the Senate, it previously was read as a person must be a tenured full-time faculty member, and we have removed the word tenure. We're suggesting that removal. And then it previously also read who served in the Senate within the prior 3 years. And who is not currently chair or past chair of the Senate. And we are suggesting removal of those last several words. So, yeah.
Explain why you removed tenure.
Yeah, so we removed tenure to open up the eligibility to people who are not on tenure track or tenured positions. It does also unintentionally, it leaves open the opportunity for someone who's not tenured, but that would be up to the person and their supervisor if you wanted to throw an assistant professor in there, but that's not the intention. The intention is to open it up to people who may be lecturers or in other professional paths that just don't have that option of being tenured. Yeah.
I know that maybe some others can speak to this, the same kind of discussion where concern was discussed a lot whenever we talked about the requirements for PCs. And language was floated around that permits full-time faculty that are not tenure track or tenured faculty and exclusively doesn't permit, at least it was proposed to not permit tenure track faculty that are not yet tenured because they have a considerable amount of exposure and or potential risk. If that language wasn't chosen here, it was probably over some discussion. Could you maybe relate some of the discussion that was had?
Yeah, so I guess in the briefest way to say it, the conclusion was people are adults, and if somebody wants to self-nominate or accept a nomination to be in such a position, that's their decision. So not to disregard your point, but that's the summary of the conversation of it. Let's consider. Are any other questions about this first point? Any suggested amendments?
Question.
So
So do you want to consider, do you want to vote on each of these as separate issues or as one entire block?
let's do each one, I guess.
Okay.
Because I have to take things off twice.
Okay.
I gotta vote. So, yes, just those in favor of the proposed approved changes for number 1, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And those abstained?
If you're, Rick, can you raise the number for just quickly? Thank you.
All right, so election of the chair, faculty senate, that section. Previously read as the Senate shall nominate at least 2 qualified persons to stand for the election, and that was changed to 1. That's a suggestion of changing it to 1. And then I think there's just some grammatical thing there with the I for in. It was added, suggested that in the case of a single candidate, which there's a typo, sorry, there will be an option to submit a vote of no confidence. All ballots will specifically include an option for a writing candidate. Well, it's preferred that more than one nominee stand. The necessity of ensuring the ongoing work of the Senate with the viable succession plan shall supersede this preference when necessary. Apologies for the typos. We can do some amendments to these. Yeah. Yeah, that would be good.
Yes.
That'd be great. Yeah. And then there was also single candidate.
I assume that we can, so there's unanimous consent for those.
Yeah. But yeah, to come back to the content, well, so we don't have to vote on that. That's great. Yeah, good. So in the case.
You can usually just ask, there's no objections to that, right?
Yeah. So does anyone want to discuss the number of candidates or the language you proposed for when there is just one candidate? consider other language? Alright, those in favor of approving with the grammatical amendments, the language as proposed for section for number 2 here, please, raise your hand. Okay, as opposed? Those abstaining?
For 3.
Okay, term of office, let's see, yeah, okay, so this is just stating the term of the chair-elect. Hang on. I apologize. Okay, so this is talking about the term of the chair-elect, and then also stating that this individual will serve automatically a 2-year term as office of chair, followed by a 1-year term as past chair of the faculty senate. And we're proposing adding language that says if not reelected as faculty senate chair, simply because of the proposed edits that were made for number 1, where someone realistically could have consecutive terms. And so they obviously cannot be transitioning in that role, but just continuing. So any questions or discussion needed about that proposed change? All those who approve of this proposed change, please raise your hand. All right, all those opposed? And abstain.
We're good. Yeah, excellent.
Wait,
All the vacancy issue.
yeah. I think, and then there's, yeah, and then there was just a typo.
That's just a typo.
Okay, and the last thing, thank you all for your attention. You're doing great. Okay, so, the context for this section is, when there is not a chair-elect. Okay, so, the change that is proposed by the committee, adds that should the position of the chair-elect become vacant, the faculty senate, with the guidance of the executive committee, shall hold a special election within 30 days of the post becoming vacant, following the same requirements for a regular election. If there's no nominee for chair-elect, an interim appointment is made at the discretion of the executive committee. And I'm not sure why all of that did not translate in blue, something like when I was doing edits, but that all is proposed as a change. So this process basically gives some authority to the executive committee to identify someone who can stand in the chair-elect. Any discussion or questions needed for that? Right, all those who approve the proposed change, raise your hand. All those opposed? And any abstain? Thank you.
Okay, so before we proceed to our focus discussions, want to make sure we don't have any other new business we need to deal with.
Actually, I need to bring an unpopular request to the faculty senate. I'm COE senator at large, and this morning I received an email from our senior associate dean, the COE, asking for us to consider having maybe a faculty senate because there are some additional curricular issues that need to be voted on to go into effect in fall 26. So one of those issues is in our SPED department. There is the ES degree, the education specialist degree, they have a certificate or a track that they want to add to that, and it's not voted on yet. There was some sort of change in the accreditation body, as I understand. So they could go through in time. And they're asking me to bring this request to the faculty senate at another meeting at the beginning of things. So and they did request it to be virtual, but as I understand from Mark, that isn't a must.
No, virtual meetings of our Senate are not authorized by our own laws.
So I'll just add before y'all consider this question that we have had to have May meetings in the past for reasons along these lines. When we have done that, we've confined the agenda strictly to the necessary items that needed to get passed. So you have my commitment that that is what we would do. If you do approve of having a May meeting, we will have to do it in person. We will have to have a quorum for it to be a point, so we will need y'all to show up. We're talking 10 minutes tops that happens. So if you've heard, if you have any questions for Robert, if not, we will need a second and then we'll have to vote.
Planners. We'll have to do some work to get it through, but
And then also require meeting GEC.
yeah, our GPC.
I received, some additional requests from the college I got proposals past our committee deadline. And so would this mean now that the UPC would need to consider those requests if we have a May meeting?
Good. Yeah, I wouldn't say that you have to. I would say that's something your committee could determine. But this certainly opens up the opportunity you could, and therefore you would be helping those programs as well. So we have a motion for a May meeting. Would there be a second? Second. So all in favor of a May meeting for necessary curriculum items? Aye. Opposed? See one, any other? Abstentions? All right, thank you. All right. Okay, any other business? So before I do want to show you all the survey that's going to be the subject of our focus discussion. Before I do, I think it's important to have some preamble and talk about the why behind why we did what we did. So we decided to conduct this survey and have this discussion because the executive committee and I really had a sense that I think a lot of us do, that communication and trust in general on this campus are central challenges for us. And the results of this survey, as we'll see in a minute, and as many of you have already seen, do substantiate that. So we're going to present and discuss the results. So at least in part, we can inform a more comprehensive climate survey that's being conducted in the fall. So part of the reason that we're doing this right now is to help the targeting that can take place when that survey is designed. We also know that our strategic planning cycle will only be successful if faculty have enough trust in our leadership and are willing to communicate and give input into that cycle. So we need to address any issue that may be preventing us from doing that now. So more generally though, many of us feel that we've lost the participatory culture that we really used to have, and we need to get it back. We need to engage together in the work of our institution, and we need to engage in robust dialogue about that work. All institutions do, all businesses do, all organizations do in order to be successful. This survey shows that we have a problem doing that. And as with all problems, the first step to moving past it is recognizing that there is a problem. So that's what we're doing. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So what I want to do is I want to talk through the survey's findings. I'll go question by question. I'm not going to read all of this to you. And I'll take breaks so we have some opportunity to discuss, but the survey was sent to you all. Many of you shared it with some of your colleagues. We have about 75. We have 75 responses as of the time I compiled all of this. The first question was what's going well and what isn't going well. And so this first page, I don't know how big it has to be so folks can actually see it. What I did on this first page is I took all of the feedback, it was all open-ended, and I organized it around some themes. So these are the three biggest themes that emerged. So I guess make it a little bit bigger. Our biggest strength that came through this is at the local level. We have so this is not currently, but this was sent to her. We will be including this in the minutes of this meeting. So everything you're going to see here, we will publish. We think things are mostly going well at the local level. We have faith in our departments and our colleagues. We recognize that we have a really strong commitment to students and teaching that is clearly identified in the survey as a strength on our campus. And we also recognize, again, one of the reasons we're talking about this now is the survey was clear that we sense we're at an inflection point with new senior leadership on campus. We sense that we have an opportunity to turn the page on some of our challenges, and that was clearly identified by many of you and your colleagues in the survey. In terms of what's not going well, the survey really identified a lot of problems at the middle and middle levels of leadership on campus and administration, especially when it comes to trust and communication, which was the focus of the survey. An ongoing theme that you'll see through many of the questions in terms of summary and in terms of the numerical responses from this question is that there is a pervasive fear of speaking up on campus, fear of retaliation, a fear of threat of retaliation. And we'll have more discussion on that in a minute. And another big theme, the third biggest theme that came out of these particular open-ended responses was a problem. There's a very explicit question later in the survey, the last question on this. There seems to be a breakdown in communication as it flows down the administrative hierarchies. The term telephone game came up several times specifically throughout these responses. What I want to do is take breaks before I move to additional questions. So on this kind of what's going well, what's not going well, give an opportunity to see if you have any comments before I move to the next question. Please, Bruce.
I have a question about, I should know the answer to this, but I do not recall. We had a large number of surveys done when Dr. Marrero was president. Do we have access to any of these data? And if we do we know if the climate survey right now is better than, equal to, or worse than it was in that particular survey?
That's a great question. So I've looked and we call those the Engage West surveys. I haven't been able to find anywhere where those are just publicly available. My chair, who's you happen to be sitting right next to, sent his at the time around, so I still have those, so I can actually see examples of them. But in terms of just institutional overview, I'm not aware of where those things are for that comparison. It's a good question. So this next question we had, there was a follow-up that had open-ended, which I'll summarize, but the basic question is here. You can see a breakdown of the responses here, and I shared this with you all in advance. Miracle. This one's fairly evenly spread out. It's very general. Doesn't have to do what types of questions or what types of feedback, but in terms of just in Senate or Senate-like meetings, how comfortable are you speaking up? And we're in this meeting a lot, and a lot of folks don't say anything. So we can see that a lot of folks just don't want to say anything in public meetings. And the overall context of the survey, I think, shows why that is the case. Just again, why we're talking about this. So for those who identified some level of uncomfortability with speaking up, then we had a follow-up question. And we can see some more themes here. And there's really, it's true, it's a balance. It's a combination of a fear of speaking out with a lack of efficacy, a perceived efficacy. So it's, well, if I speak out, something bad might happen to me, and I also really don't see a point of speaking out because whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. That's what the survey is finding. Again, we'll publicize all this. Want to give an opportunity to see if anybody has any comments on this particular question. The next question, please.
Was the Engage West survey the last time faculty was surveyed on a topic like this?
Yes. Yes, it was. So in fall of 24, the Senate also organized a broad-based survey that was specifically focused on the provost. That's the only rough, I'm not saying that's comparable, but that is the only roughly comparable thing since pre-pandemic, since Morero's era that we've had that's even remotely in this wheelhouse, which is one of the reasons why we're all extremely happy that we're having a climate survey conducted in the fall, and why we've been asking for that. So that's a really good development. And again, while we're doing this, is just we want to make sure that survey is asking the right questions. We're not claiming that this is a big comprehensive campus-wide survey. We just want to make sure that the one that is going to be covering the right bases. So this next question, I think, is a little bit more informative to why folks don't want to contribute. So how concerned are you that asking questions or offering feedback could result in negative repercussions for you? In a lot of cases for your program. So we can see if you do the math here, see that not just the majority, but over 3/4 of respondents indicate some level of concern that engaging in dialogue that's perceived as critical or some variation of that is going to be unwise for them to do. So for that 76% that said they were asked to follow up, why are you concerned about this? And we can see some additional themes. And it's a lot of overlap with the previous one. There's some fear of retaliation. And there's also we see a lot of legacy. There's the past is still showing up strongly in this. So speaking of retaliation, this question specifically asked, have you witnessed or personally experienced any type of retaliation for asking criticism? And it's about 50-50 in terms of yes or no. For those who had said yes, what examples? Most respondents simply didn't want to answer this question. A lot of the responses to this question basically said, I'm not comfortable answering this question, which is fair. There are around 10 responses to this question that included some observable claim of, I saw this concrete thing happen as a retaliation for this. Being very transparent, in the vast majority, if not all of these cases, there's plausible deniability. It could be argued whether or not it was in fact retaliation or it was something else. Nonetheless, when you talk about it, because there's enough people on here that say, hey, this happened and I perceived it as retaliation. And I think that's an important one. The perception is really important. Another thing, in the preamble that was sent with this survey, we asked that you really only think about relatively recent history when you're answering this. And a lot of the stories that were provided about retaliation for this question go back farther than that. They go back into President Kelly's era. I think that's a really important point to highlight. On that front, before I move on to the last question, it's important to note that this survey, and you can see it here, it documents fear of retaliation much more clearly than it documents evidence of retaliation. That's a critical point for us to all be honest about. We can't continue to let the past poison the present. At some point, we have to understand that we have a new, we have an opportunity to turn the page. There are problems and there are challenges. I'll get to you in just a second. There are problems, there are challenges identified in the survey that we as rank and file faculty can't do anything about. We're going to clearly cover that again in a second. But it's important for us to understand that we have a role in this. We have to change. And I want to be clear, I want to convey something that I heard in the smaller meeting, President Johnson very specifically and clearly say. And I think he'd be happy for me to say this, I hope. If someone in your administrative hierarchy tries to stifle your constructive engagement in how we do what we do, President Johnson needs to know about it. President at westgeorgia.edu. He needs to know about it. I can tell you that he values and respects straight talk and he listens. I've seen him get a lot of straight talk. He's gotten a lot of straight talk from me. I've seen him, he always listens, and I've seen him alter course based on some of this. And that's not always going to happen, whether we're talking to our dean or our chair or director or our president. There's not always going to be a course correction there. But I know that he wants all of those people to follow his example. So what I'm trying to encourage you to do is turn the page. And if there are situations that are where we see habits from the past playing out in the present, let our president do something about it. Please.
To your point, and I wonder how prevalent this is across campus. I know that I encouraged several colleagues to fill out the survey and talk to them first. The Senate state is really important to me. And there were several who said, I don't feel comfortable filling it out because I don't think it's really. And I don't know if that was something that other people, I mean, to your point that there's a lot of kind of embedded feelings about this. I think that's really true.
It is true. I mean, that came through very clearly. I heard that from a lot of people. I will tell you, just to publicly acknowledge it, it is anonymous. I can't see, the raw responses from the survey I shared with Laura. I appreciate Elle's trust. I know Laura is also very much trusted. But even though Laura and she can confirm, you cannot see who's filling these things out. I will say, I'm not going to go any farther than that because some people did put in the open-ended things that identifiable information. So I'm not going to share any farther than that. That's why I'm just doing the summary. But there is very clear, it's unarguable that there is a pervasive fear on the campus. Let's get past it. Let's identify it. Let's not say that doesn't exist. Let's get past it, please.
I would say about the appreciate Johnson, your tone. Way you addressed the faculty today, that was fresh, it's new, felt right, felt good to be addressed that way. But I worry that if we go directly to you, skip over to the provost, the chair, and others, that can be perceived as stepping over the chain of command. And not sure that would be perceived.
Would you like to respond or you want?
Well, I will. Can I wrap up after your?
Sure. Sure.
Okay. 3.
You can have much time as you want. Okay. Sure.
People are afraid to speak up for the fear of actually talking a lot, also because they feel like there's there's like a higher risk and a lower reward.
Yep.
So if you at least felt like if I say something, yes, I might be risking this, but I also know that change is likely to occur or that somebody's going to hear me out,
Yep.
And so I think that at heart we could start seeing visible evidence of that. It's actually not futile, it actually does work. Then we might feel more at ease about putting ourselves on to take this.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a couple things. There's an efficacy piece here for sure. I'll tell you a couple things. One of the first things that political scientists teach an intro political science class, like, why don't people engage? Why is engagement important? Number one, I mean, if you don't use your voice, it guarantees your voice isn't heard, and it elevates other voices. And if you don't use your voice, you're not going to influence or understand decision making. Now, it doesn't mean your voice is going to get listened to, or that you're going to influence decision making. It just means that you won't. So that's a general principle. The other thing I will say is recent history. If you look at recent history, I can think of many examples where our most senior leadership has listened and altered course. We made some changes in terms of how we're dealing with the workload thing because he listened and altered course. Right? It's not going to happen all the time, but it will only happen if there's something to listen to. I saw a contribution over here. Thank you. Yes.
So, thanks. So first of all, I've been the chair of my department for 4 years on June 30th. I'll be stepping down on June 30th, and I am really excited. This is not from outside pressure to step down. This came internal. I'm really, really excited. But one thing I can say is that I go to provost council, and I've spoken to provost on things multiple times. I've asked President Johnson questions, I've asked the provost questions, and I've been, a couple times have been suggested to me that maybe I talk too much. But I'm also incredibly stubborn and don't respond well to anything that I view as potential threat. So that makes me more encouraged to speak because I grew up in a holler in West Virginia. Most of you probably know what that means, but that makes me stubborn. It makes me not easily cowed by what I would see as a bully. So I can say that I've seen times where I felt some pressure that maybe you and your colleagues in political science speak too much, but that really emboldens me as opposed to gets me to shut up. But I would also say that I've never felt as a chair who pushing back against administration ever got a threat that I would be removed as chair. I never had any concern about losing my position as chair. So while you can feel pressure at times, maybe not to speak, I never actually have felt at threat that I would lose my position or my job for speaking up. And when I return to the faculty, it's not going to make me any less engaged in speaking up. So I just am never going to be timid. Thank you.
But before we run out of time, so we can make sure we have some time for our president to add a point or two, I really wanted to emphasize that we have a role in moving us to a better place. But I don't want to ignore the fact that it's not just us. So this question identified what we all know is a significant problem on this campus. It was reflected also in the first question is, well, how well do you think messaging from senior leadership actually makes it down to frontline leadership? And you can see that 19% of us actually perceive alignment between what our senior leadership conveys in public forums and what actually gets implemented at the bottom. Something happens in the middle. And this goes back to strong perception of the what folks that call it a telephone game situation, where as messages move down the chain, something happens. And what ultimately gets implemented does not align with what was publicly said. There's also a lot of issues identified around written versus spoken directives. Also, if it's not written down, doesn't mean anything to me. Also, it can be said in public forum. I need to see it in writing, etc. Also, some challenges around the research, rhetoric, and goals and actual capacity. But this goes back to the efficacy. Well, the final big thing here was identified around, hey, when we are offered the idea to get some input, that seems like it might just be performative. At least that's the sense. And I think that's what we should take away with service like this. It's not about what is attempted, right? It's not about what is truly the the message, right? Maybe we're having a listening session that is a true listening session. It's about the perception. Right? Surveys like this pick up on perceptions. Perceptions are very important. The clear perception is oftentimes when our input is sought, it's performable. So we have a role to move on and recognize that we're in a new era. But I think it's important to understand that our leadership also has some work they need to do, at least from our perception. With that, before we run out of time, my last meeting, I don't want to go over, so I hand the floor over to our folks.
We have to agree.
As long as this is important, but
I want to make sure I keep you, as I know your time's valuable. I appreciate the value of the survey. Couple things. One, I hope that in the last 9 months, and I haven't had a chance to interact with every single one of you on the same level that I have with everybody in this room, and certainly your counterparts back in your various departments. But I hope that I've shown that I'm open. I'm happy to have conversations. Maybe I'm too open, but I believe in being honest. And I told you in the very beginning, right? And then maybe it's a cliche to say, oh, we're a family, but we have to have honest discussions. We have to know where we stand. We have to know what's real, what's not real. And I know that, some of you may not always like what I have to say, but at least you'll know I'm being honest with you. And we may not always agree, but we can at least agree that we're both of us want to do what's best for the university. And ultimately, someone has to be the decider. And so I'll take all the input and then a decision will be made. And if we have to course correct, then we'll course correct. And we can talk about, well, that was a bad call. But we're always going to do what's best for the students, right? So I'm never going to penalize you. I come from the military, right? And so in the military, right, it's all about making sure that the communication is getting down to the lowest unit. If you talk about Napoleon, right, the strategic corporal, hey, if you understand it, then hopefully the dean will understand it, which means that the chair will understand it. Because for some reason, if it's getting broken down, I can only say it here in open forums and to people that talk to me. I don't think I talk out of both sides of my mouth. I think what I say is exactly what I say in any group that I'm in. So if it's not being clear, then I need you to know. And as Dylan just announced with regards to my email, absolutely with regards to the military, I think you should use your command, right? I think it's only fair to them. I think you should go to your department chair and you should give your dean a chance to address those issues. But if they're the problem, now it's a slippery slope, right? Because if you're calling saying this person is the problem, then you have to be prepared to back that up and support that argument. And it can't be that you're just in disagreement about what you think is this versus whatever, because they're in a leadership role and they're making the same tough decisions and they've got other variables that they're having to bounce that against. But I want to hear your problems, right? That's not just an open complaint session to the president, right, line. While I certainly appreciate that, but it's legitimate things that can fix, right? Because I can't speak. Let me back up and say I can't speak for previous administrations. I can't speak how their leadership style, the decisions that they made, why they made them, or whatnot. And I'm not going to sit here and chastise or criticize those particular leaders and whatnot. I can just tell you what kind of leader I am. I've never been one to say that I'm at the top of the pyramid. I believe I'm in the center of the circle, and we're all trying to get to the same thing. Now, whether or not you agree with the direction that we're going or the pace that we're going, we can discuss the finer points of that. And I'm happy to have those conversations with each and every one of you. When you start to be an obstructionist to helping me achieve that objective, or you're like, can say, we have to slow down. I know where you want to go, but this is the way to go about it. I deal much better in those environments. But if you're like, it just can't be done, then I get frustrated because then I need you to explain to me, well, why can't it be done? Again, I can't speak for previous administrations. If they never included you in these conversations and you never felt like you were involved as a faculty senate, I think very early on, I think if you talk to my colleagues at Houston, faculty senate's disbanded there, but if you talk to the previous faculty senate, I think they'll tell you, to be fair, I did not do that. I think they'll tell you that I'm a huge supporter of shared governance. And I repeatedly say that. I think shared governance gives diversity of thought, right? It makes for a stronger institution. And so I think your opinions and thoughts are critical to that. You're about the unintended consequences. I can't possibly know every single decision, whether that's theater and online classes or whether that's graduate students or whatnot. All that has to be taken into account. And at the end of the day, what's best for the institution. But I want to make sure that we're all moving ahead. And so if you feel like you're not supported, if you feel like you should never feel like you have a target on your back or that you can't, say what you need to say, right? That shouldn't be an environment through fear. That's not the type of leader that I am. That's certainly not the type of leadership that I want. I will tell you when I first got here, and I know we're running high on time, it wasn't only that I needed to change the organization and the direction that it needs to go, but I truly felt, and Mark can certainly attest to this when I was talking to him in the beginning, like there was a morale issue. There was an esprit de corps issue. There was a pride issue, and you could just feel it that people, and again, I can't speak to the reasons why, but so not only am I having to like change the university, but I'm also having to like rebuild and like empower leaders to be leaders. And maybe and I hope, we have at least one chair, right? I hope chairs feel empowered to make decisions. I hope deans feel empowered to make decisions. I've certainly empowered my cabinet to make decisions, but they didn't feel that when I first got here. And I think that was a shock to them. And I'm like, go, lead. That's what you get paid to do, right? I'm not here to micromanage you. I'm here to remove roadblocks to your success. And so if you're feeling that or what, then email me, let me know what's going on. I can't fix it if I don't know what's going on. Right. And it's about trust, but verify. I sit down with you as an individual, or I sit down with the student athletes or any group and I ask questions because I may be hearing from the provost, and this isn't the bag on the provost. I may be hearing from the CFO and they may have one perspective. If I hear multiple perspectives, then I'm going to question that. And I would expect Mark to do the same thing. If he smells smoke and he sees smoke, then he's going to start asking questions. And it could be just complaining. Not this group, right? But you do have some colleagues that might just have general complaints. And they're going to hate no matter who's in this office, right? Doesn't matter if it's me or the next person. That's different than there being a legitimate issue that you needed to get to. And then, so you should be allowed to do your work without fear of retaliation or whatnot. We're not always going to agree. We're not always going to have the same opinions, but at least you should give me your honest opinion and feel like you're heard. And if you want to talk to me afterwards or email me, then do that. My door is always open. I've never once told somebody that I can't talk. So does that answer your question as well? I appreciate it. Thank you.
I did reach out to Holly, the Senate president at Houston, and that's exactly what she told me. You just said.
That I did disband?
Well, yeah, I knew. That was the state government did that. But, yeah. All right, folks, that's all I have. Time's up, so thank you so much.
Are they going
Okay.